Connard recently published his first book. It's part of a trilogy, and it's called Hollymac. Today we're here to gain insight about the book and the author. So you've been a teacher for 15 plus years. You love working with kids, and now you're a published author. How does it feel?
Wow, it feels like a lot of things actually. It's exhilarating, it's exciting, it's a little scary, but I've enjoyed it thoroughly so far. I realize how much there is to get a book done now, and it's a pretty complicated process. But now that it's finished and kids are out there reading it, it's really super exciting, and I'm really pumped up about it.
I've always wondered what inspired people to write books. Why did you write Hollymac?
I wrote Hollymac for a couple good reasons. I recall when I was younger, I myself was a pretty reluctant reader. I would pick up magazines here and there, but a book was kind of a daunting task. I felt like I was very intimidated by it. And now that I've been a teacher for a number of years and seen the kinds of books that are being written for kids and teens and then young adults, I've kind of got a feel for what is necessary for kids to pick up things like storylines and understatement, overstatement, things that are going to get to kids and keep them turning the pages. And I think it's so important to me that we can produce a product or I could produce a product where kids feel comfortable reading and getting something out of it and feeling accomplishment as they read. I know for me that was absolutely a fear that I had, and I think that by writing something that kids can use to build their confidence in reading, to build their lexile, to build their comprehension, it's just really the main impetus or reason that I wrote the book.
Well, that competence and motivation, and we've found really to be critical for those students to be successful as they go through the years, so that's terrific.
Right, I mean, as long as, if they can, if they feel like they can and they're getting something out of it, and it just seems to me to be the most important thing with anyone who writes a book. Of course, it's been a dream of mine to put something out like Hollymac. I've always been fond, it's written in a first-person narrative, and I've always been very fond of writing in first-person narrative because it gives the reader a sense that they're actually part of the story. And I think that's so intrinsic and valuable because if they feel like they're part of it, they're in that scene, they're going to remember it, and it's going to build comprehension. So it's really, that's been the main reason that I wrote this book. To get not only for reluctant readers, but for readers of all levels. I think it's a book that transcends just one particular group of people. I think that anyone that picks it up, anyone from 4th grade or even younger up to adult age, will enjoy the book because it has mystery, it has intrigue, it has things that kids and adults like. They share that like. And I think that's something with this book is something that children and adults can read it together and get something out of it. And in fact, what a way to have a relationship with your child to read a book. I think it's one of the greatest things you can do. So.
In Hollymac, it's set in Belize, and throughout the whole book, there are references to the Mayan culture. I'm just curious why you chose that setting and a focus on the Mayan culture.
Wow, well, you know what? That's a great question because the Maya as a civilization have been, a great civilization. Mesoamerica's greatest civilization, in my opinion. I first started following and reading about the Maya, believe it or not, when I was in 6th grade. And this is exactly the audience that I'm writing for now. But I just came to love that culture. A very dear friend and great teacher, his name was Mr. Moynihan. He loved the Maya, and this is before being Maya was cool. And he stressed to us the significance of how complex their societies were, and this was before they actually had even decoded the friezes to come up with the actual and understand all of the language and the written language that was put forth by the Maya. But he had such a love of it, and at that time, I was my parents had a ton of magazines, things like National Geographic. Smithsonian, and others archaeology journals. And I would sift through them, and I'd find all I could do was try and find the ones about the Maya. And it was just intriguing to me. It was incredible that with Chichen Itza and some of the other temples that had been discovered at the time, so many more have been discovered since. I just knew that I had a kind of a familiarity with it, and I think that as writers we should always write about things that we know or feel strongly about. And I feel that that them being some of the one of the greatest civilizations I think on the planet in the world's history, it was just perfect for the story that I had intended. The Belize has not been, in my mind, when you talk about the Maya, Belize isn't even mentioned that much, but there are Altunaha and various other sites that are so important to what was going on in the Mesoamerican community and the Maya community in general, specifically I should say. I just knew that I could form a story there. I just knew that you could write a captivating story, the mystique of the landscape, the local legends, the backdrop, the temples, the Maya mountains. It was all right there. It was a perfect setting for an adventurous young lad who was out to discover something on his own, kind of a rite of passage. And I knew that if I wrote this book, that people would be interested not only in the book itself and the plot, but the Maya and how wonderful they are and how wonderful they were. There has been a ton of shows, information, news magazines talking about certain things like the doomsday prophecies of the Maya that are purported, and through my research, I don't find the same things. So it is my intention through this fictional novel to give people a different perspective on some of these things like doomsday prophecies and other ideas. Also, I blended in some other ideas that have captivated mankind from the dawn of civilization, things like the Fountain of Youth, which has been with us from first the Fertile Crescent in northern Africa through Europe, and then it bled its way over to the Americas, and we all know about Ponce de Leon. And so I thought, wow, how can I get these two stories together and make it fun and exciting and adventurous? And so I just felt like those two things being so powerful in the minds of readers and what's going on today, that I just felt like it was a perfect place. It's a perfect time to have a story just centered, focused in Belize about the Maya, and to kind of give a good picture of what they did and who they are.
I'm always intrigued about how authors come up with the different characters in their book. Hollymac is obviously the main character of your book. Is there a story behind Hollymac? Is he completely fictitious, or do you have insights to share?
That's a really good question. I think Hollymac is kind of a blending or an amalgamation, if you will, of many people that I've met in my past and in my future, and even day-to-day travels. I started as a journalist back in college. I wrote feature articles for the periodical, and I got to know and interview a lot of very interesting people. And I always found it amazing that these people are just so much more interesting in general than even fictional characters at times. And I thought, wow, if you can take these characters, these people, these real life experiences, and blend them together and come to create a character, I think that's what all writers do. When you create a character, it's because you have experienced certain things with a lot of different people. And so when I started to develop Hollymac, a young 15-year-old, intelligent, brave, savvy lad, it really, a few really good inspirations came from people that I knew. One was a person, his name was Pat Robinson. He was a really great friend of mine. We met early on. His nickname was S.W. And he was very much like Hollymac is in this novel. He was self-sure, he was intelligent, he was well-read, he was confident. And I thought a lot about him when I was writing this story. And we had a lot of adventures together. We traveled cross-country. And so all of those experiences are kind of drawn together to form this character. And I hope it's a character that the kids can get behind and enjoy. I think we as writers do that naturally. We take our personal experiences and we kind of spin it into a system or a web of characters and plot that comes out to tell a story. And characters are so vital, obviously, to the story. And so that's who Hollymac is. Hollymac 15-year-old kid that wants to go out on a midnight camping trip and hike or traverse a mountain or rappel down the side of a cliff. That's kind of who Hollymac is, and I think that I hope it touches everybody who reads it that way. That wow, yes, I remember doing that one time, or that character reminds me of something I did in the past. So, and I'm talking again from young readers all the way up through adults and beyond. I think everyone can enjoy it, and so I think the development of characters is vital to the plot of a story. And that's who Hollymac is. He's a little bit of all of us. I'd like to think I'm a little bit of Hollymac.
When I read Hollymac, I noticed that there was an immediate connection right away between Hollymac and Hugo. Can you describe the thought process that went into that?
They did. They did have an almost instantaneous connection when they met. Hollymac peers over and he sees him and they lock eyes, and going back to my own childhood, the same kind of thing happened. I mean, there was a tussle between Hugo and Hollymac, and there was a tussle, in fact, between Pat Robinson and myself the first day we ever met, and we were sitting together in a compromising situation, and we found that we had a lot in common, and he ended up coming home with me that day, and so a lot of what's going on between Hugo and Hollymac was born out of my childhood and things that happened to me so long ago. And you have to understand that any story has to have relationships. I mean, it's part of what a plot is, but for Hollymac the book Hollymac, not the character, but for Hollymac, the plot behind it to come to fruition, to make a statement, Hollymac himself had to meet someone that could take him on his journey, and this is very much a book about journeys. And so that friendship that they developed right away just reminded me of something that happened to me in my past, and it's just what happens to writers, and it happens to all of us, and I think we're all writers, and we could all do this. So that's what I thought about when they were forming that relationship, and then Hugo and his relationship and who he was, and that as an indigenous person in that culture, being able to bring him through the jungle and to kind of mark this rite of passage for really both characters. It was necessary, it was compelling, it was interesting, and the formation of the bond as friendship is basically definitely an underlying tone to the book. So, I mean, it serves a couple different purposes, but it was very important to me that these two became friends. They had so much in common too, neither one had ever known their mother, and although they never say that in the book, I think the readers get a feel for that, and that camaraderie that they form as they go through these dire situations and they explore and journey and basically, go all the way to the end. Well, I don't want to go to the end. I don't want to talk about it too much.
Well, do you expect these characters to continue on in your sequels?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Hollymac forms a friendship with Hugo that he'll never forget. And it's so valuable, and the importance that's put on this relationship towards the end of the book, and when you read it, you'll see. Yeah, absolutely. I believe that we're going to see Hugo again. Absolutely. I don't want to really tell you when, but I think we will. Sure.
Would you mind taking a minute and tell me about some of the other characters in your book?
Where do we start? There are a lot of good characters, I think, in Hollymac. Professor McDonnell, he's self-sure, and you could tell that Hollymac is, in a way, an extension of him. I would say that he's kind of a blend of some of my own father and an uncle that I had that was very adventuresome, and kind of had that quick wit, that quiet confidence, and that's what I try to kind of capture with the character of Professor McDonnell. Although we don't see that much of him in this book, we're going to see a lot more of him in the next two. Jack, the older brother figure who was part of the family. I mean, again, he's an amalgamation or kind of a grouping of various other people. Again, strong, a little bit reckless, happy-go-lucky, doing what he wants for a living. I mean, those are the kinds of characters that we all can attach to, and we kind of want to be like that to a certain degree. And so I think Jack's presence in this story, and he'll be also prominent in the future stories as well. the lab technician. His name was borrowed from a Colombian immigrant that used to work for my father, and it was almost the exact same name. And he just reminded me of this character. He was stout, he was strong, he was barrel-chested, he was good-hearted, and so every character, every main character in this book has been brought to me from things I remembered in my childhood, my young adult years, and even now. And I think that's for me, that's what writers do. You know, we incorporate what we're comfortable with, what we know, and it's fun when you're actually writing something like this because you can just make them be exactly how you want them to be. And we know how frail the human condition is, and a lot of times we can make a character more compelling with the pen than we can in real life. So, as far as Father Fairweather, the actual first during my research, a lot of these names came out of my research as well, and Father Fairweather was actually the first father of that church, and it was the first Anglican church built in Mesoamerica, as I believe it was 1819. No, I'm sorry, excuse me, 1765 or something. But anyway, the first person to run the church was a man named Fairweather. So I thought I'd give a nod to that first priest that was there in the church. So different reasons for naming characters, different things. But again, it's you draw from your own experience as a writer and try to to make it intriguing, make it comfortable, make it happy, make it adventurous. Whatever it takes to move the story along in a good way. And I don't know. I think that's my secret for developing characters.
Hollymac is finally a published book. Tell us a little bit about the process that you actually went through.
Really, to tell you the truth, Hollymac has been in the works for about 40 years.
Wow.
I'm half a century now, since I was 10. I've been thinking about this story. We talked earlier about different kinds of magazines and books and stuff. Mr. Moynihan's influence on me. It was then that I started, conjuring these ideas and stories. Many stories have developed out of that over the years. But this particular story, I've probably had in my mind for about, I don't know, anywhere from 6, 7, 8 years. And it's kind of matured as the process has gone along. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to write this and that's the way it's going to go. When I first started writing Hollymac, I knew I was going to end for sure. I knew how it was going to end. That's exactly where I was going, and I knew how I was going to start. What I did was I mapped out 12 chapters that I thought were absolutely imperative to get my plot across. Okay, so I had my ideas about an introduction, what was going to entice the kids or the reader, what was going to make them want to read more, and that's what the prologue's about. It's a character sketch. And then I started in with the plot. What is the main idea? And sunken treasure, come on, there's something about that makes your heart stir, right? You want to get out there and do that if you had a chance. Wouldn't we all want to do that if we could just do that? And so I had about 12 chapters, and I just developed it out of that. Well, as I started writing, and it was a writing process, took a couple years actually putting it together. I found that I couldn't get from this chapter to this chapter without having another chapter in the middle, and so there were things that came up too as I was writing that, like, wow, I've got to put that in. Like, as I was doing my research, I saw the Festival of the Tigre, which is something that spans 2 different cultures, where we had Catholicism blending in with the actual Mayan culture, and these Mayan city-states of old, and the now cities and villages, where they still kind of go through these battles and do the same thing they've been doing for years. I had to have that in there. That was really important to me. The C.S.U. is an actual Guatemalan legend that I had to write I wrote a whole chapter once I researched that and had a friend from Guatemala. She shared with what the C.S.U. was. You're going to have to read the book to get to that. But, and so I wanted to put that in. I think it's interesting, I think it's informative, and it really went with the plot. So things did blossom and develop as I was going, and the more research I did, and there was a tremendous amount of research. Many books that I read, I can't really count how many, and articles, countless articles. I subscribed, again, to archaeology magazines and National Geographic, Smithsonian, detailing a lot about the Maya. So when I would find something new, I thought, wow, that's intriguing, that's new, that's exciting, that's fascinating. I would want to put it in. And so I would find a place for it. So I started off with like 10 to 12 chapters, and I ended up with 22 with an epilogue and a prologue. So,
Well, of course, this process has taken place while you've been a full-time teacher as well as a father of two very active girls. So that, of course, takes time too.
yeah, again, the 2 years. Children, my lovely children and family, we hang out, do a lot of fun things, just like every family does. But I had special time. I mean, a good friend of mine, Mary Branca, she once told me, she gave me a book, Where and How Writers Write, where they write. What do you do? Some writers write in the middle of the night. Some writers write when they get home from work or before they go to work, or that is their job. For me, the best time for me to write was like on weekends. In the morning before everyone got up. So I'd get up at 3, 4 in the morning and I'd write for 2 or 3 hours and I'd pump out a chapter here and I'd pump out a chapter there. And that was when it was my time to write. Everybody has their time to write. Everyone has their time when they're most fertile, they're most creative, and that was my time. So as it developed, the publishing process is really intriguing. I had a very romantic idea that okay, I've got this book done. All I need to do is get some brown paper and some white string and just put a address on it and send it off to a publisher and they publish it. And that really isn't exactly how it goes.
Well, isn't it true you finished writing this book just about 2 years ago?
About 2 years ago, yeah. And that's the amazing part. There's so much to it. I had a wonderful publisher, Create Space, who's worked diligently with me and been so accommodating and so wonderful. I just want to give them a shout out. And it's just been a good relationship, but it's very time consuming, and there's a lot of creativity when it goes into, say, the cover of the book or to the style. I wanted to make sure that this book was good as far as styling goes. It was spaced properly. I know when I was a child, it was very difficult for me to read books that had very tight spacing, and I wanted a bit of a larger font. I wanted cream-colored paper rather than white paper. These are things that I had no idea about when I first started writing Hollymac. I'm a creative person. I'm not a business person, so to speak. So, but I knew there were certain things that I wanted to do, and Create Space gave me that opportunity to do that.
So where do I go to buy the book?
Well, you know, you can buy Hollymac all over the place. You can go to Amazon.com. That's a good place to start. I also, if you go to my website, it's hollymactales.com, and it's got a lot of information about me, information about the book, special events, and it's a work in progress. But there's a direct link to either Amazon.com or Create Space, which is my personal publisher, and there are actually some discount codes there. So that's good for the kids. I just want to get the in the kids' hands as cheaply as possible and as quickly as possible so they can read this book and gain something from it. And I'll be doing events. We're doing a book launch here shortly, and we'll be also doing other events, and hopefully at some libraries and some small bookstores, and just to get the word out.
I'm sure that information will be on your website where those book launches and events will be held.
Yeah, absolutely. All that information, we'll try and keep our readers up to date on that. I'm currently in the process of getting my next, the second book of the trilogy out right now. That's an exciting process for me too. It's in the Indus Valley culture and between Pakistan and India, and it's really quite intriguing, one of the oldest civilizations on the planet. So I think there's a lot there, and I think it's really exciting. Hollymac's going to have a heck of a time, so it's good. So.
That's perfect.
Well, that's all the time that we have today. I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of your insights.
No. Well, really, the thanks goes to you. Thank you so much, Wendy and Barbara, for being throughout the process you've been here. It's been magical for me, and I really appreciate all the things that you've done for me. And thanks for having me in this little presentation. It's been fun. It's been really wonderful. Thank you.